Says here, The Maya Flood Myth and the Decapitation of the Cosmic Caiman by Eric Velázquez Garcia, Instituto de Investigaciones Estéticas, UNAM, or the University of Americas, I believe. It says here, the flooding of water. Among the Maya groups that left behind written testimonies during the post-classic and colonial periods, we find different accounts that revolve around the existence of a flood that wiped out the previous world and allowed for the creation of a new cosmological order. With the Quiche, for instance, this flooding was produced by Uk Yak Kayak, out of the sky, or Huracan, mother and father of the gods. In order to annihilate the race of the men of wood, Bartolomé de las Casas also mentions that amongst the Quechua people from Verapaz, there was news about a flood and the end of the world, and they called it Boutique, which means deluge of many waters, and also judgment. And so they believe that another Boutique is yet to come, which is another flood and judgment, not of water, but of fire, which they say has to be the end of the world, in which all creatures will fight each other. You hear that? A similar passage is contained in the Relación de la Ciudad de Mérida de la Garza, which confirms the belief in successive floods of water and fire, as well as a caiman that symbolizes the flooding and the earth. They had also news about the fall of Lucifer and the flood, and that the world shall end by fire, and in order to signify this, they performed a ceremony where they painted a caiman that meant the deluge and the earth, upon which caiman they made a great pile of wood and put it on fire. And after it was turned into live coal, they flattened it, and the main priest passed barefooted over the live coal without being burned, all right? Just like the Hindus or some people in the other side of the world do today. And after him, everybody else who wished also passed, understanding by this that it was the fire that shall finish them all. For the Yucatec Maya, the flooding was caused by Mukeng, Kab, he who is buried underneath the earth, and by the Bolontiku, the 9 gods, telluric forces that outraged the 13 gods of heaven and robbed them of their insignia. As a consequence of this, the sky fell, and according to Landa, the 4 Bak Kab escaped the destruction. Maybe because of this, the word Bak Kab is written on page 74 of the Dresden Codex, a passage traditionally interpreted as the destruction of the world caused by a flood. All right, that's figure 9. And this is figure 9, what they're talking about right here in the Dresden Codex. All right, you see, this is the torrent of water that's falling, you see, and that's going to cause the flood. The torrent of water falling. In this scene, we observe that the old goddess Chakchel is pouring out the destructive waters that she carries in a jar, while a black painted god, all right, a black painted god, here we go, black painted god, holds his weapons over the surface of the earth while wielding a long staff. And he has a staff, right? A black god with a staff, and he has a weapon over the surface of the earth. Streams of water descend from the jaws of a pluvian caiman and from a pair of eclipse glyphs that it carries below its body. According to Carl Tobey, the expression black sky and black earth that appear in this scene are a possible reference to the destruction of the world. In Michael Coe's opinion, this topic was picked up on page 32 of the Madrid Codex, where another black deity, which has been identified as Zimmerman's God Z, all right, God Z, that's what they call him, another black deity. All right, it says Hernandez and Bricker appears holding his weapon under a sky band from which rain is pouring. We notice that the god grabs a spear, 2 darts, a shield, and a spear thrower, a snake which probably represents lightning. Miller and Tobey seems to tear a hole in the celestial band. As on Dresden Codex, page 74, we find eclipse signs that hang from the band. Underneath the scene in the Madrid, there is an image of the goddess Chakchel, between whose open legs a stream of water is pouring, which corresponds perhaps to the destructive liquid that the goddess pours on Dresden, page 74, at the Karsa. All right, so this is what they were talking about, the black deity, all right, holding the spear, right, and his weapon. All right. All right, so in this book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. Now we're in chapter 5, right? Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. Now it says here, the Deluge Legends of America. It is a very remarkable fact, says Alfred Maury, that we find in America traditions of the deluge coming infinitely nearer to that of the Bible and the Chaldean religion than among any people of the old world. All right? So the traditions they found in America resemble so much more the story of the people of the old world than any other, mythology they find all over the world. In America, right? We just know the deluge, as Cosmos said, happened in the West, in America. So of course they would have the closest, nearest, because this is the original story before it was hijacked and made into Bible, right? Now we continue in the book. Now it says, the most important among the American traditions are the Mexican, for they appear to have been definitely fixed by symbolic and mnemonic paintings before any contact with Europeans. According to these documents, the Noah of the Mexican cataclysm was Coxcox, called by certain peoples Teocipactli or Tespi. He had saved himself together with his wife Xochiquetzal in a bark, or according to other traditions, on a raft made of cypress wood. Cypress, cedar wood, the strongest wood. All right. Cypressus disticha. Paintings retacting the deluge of Coxcox have been discovered among the Aztecs, Mixtecs, Zapotecs, Tlaxcaltecs, and Michoacaneses. All right, so they have the codices with this story of Coxcox. The tradition of the latter is still more strikingly in conformity with the story as we have it in Genesis and in Chaldean sources. All right, so it tells how Tepsi embarked in a spacious vessel with his wife, his children, and several animals, and grain whose preservation was essential to the subsistence of the human race. When the great god Tezcatlipoca decreed that the waters should retire, Tezpi sent a vulture from the bark. The bird feeding on the carcasses with which the earth was laden did not return. Tezpi sent out other birds, of which the hummingbird only came back with a leafy branch in its beak. Then Tezpi, seeing that the country began to vegetate, left his bark on the mountain of Colhuacan. The document, however, that gives the most valuable information says Lenormand. As to the cosmogony of the Mexican is the one known as Codex Vaticanus, from the library where it is preserved. It consists of 4 symbolic pictures representing the 4 ages of the world preceding the actual one. They were copied at Cholula from a manuscript anterior to the conquest and accompanied by the explanatory commentary of Pedro de los Rios, a monk, who in 1566, less than 50 years after the arrival of Cortes, devoted himself to the research of indigenous traditions as being necessary to his missionary work. All right, so continuing the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, it says that the name of the hero of the Aztec story, Nata, pronounced with the broad sound of ah, is not far from the name of Noah or Noé. The deluge of Genesis is a Phoenician, Semitic, or Shemitic, or Hebraic legend, and yet strange to say the name of Noah, which occurs in it, bears no appropriate meaning in those tongues, but is derived from Aryan sources. Its fundamental root is Na, to which in all the Aryan languages is attached to the meaning of water, to flow. Nympha, Neptunus, water deities. We find the root Na repeated in the name of this Central American Noah, Nata, and probably in the word Nahualt, the age of water. But still more striking analogies exist between the Chaldean legend and the story of the deluge as told in the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Central Americans. Then the waters were agitated by the will of the heart of heaven, Huracan, and a great inundation came upon the heads of these creatures. They were engulfed, and a resinous thickness descended from heaven. The face of the earth was obscured, and a heavy darkening rain commenced. Rain by day and rain by night. There was heard a great noise above their heads, as if produced by fire. Then were men seen running, pushing each other, filled with despair. They wished to climb upon their houses, and the houses, tumbling down, fell to the ground. They wished to climb upon the trees, and the trees shook them off. They wished to enter into the grottos or caves, and the grottos closed themselves before them. Water and fire contributed to the universal ruin at the time of the last great cataclysm, which preceded the fourth creation. All right, again, that was from the Popol Vuh. Recommend you reading the Popol Vuh. I've told you this is where most of the stories of the Old Testament or Genesis you would find right here in the Popol Vuh. All right, so just to correlate, just to show you it's not just in this antediluvian Atlantis book. This is actual real history. We find this same story in the writings of Lord Kingsborough here in the Antiquities of Mexico. Again, this is a comprising facsimiles of ancient Mexican paintings and hieroglyphics. The first 4 volumes are just the codices and the drawings of the structures, and from volume 5 to 9 is the explanation of the codices. In volume 6, this is where we are now. It's translated mostly all in English. All right, so we're going to go to a part of this volume 6 where they're talking about Noah. So on page 117, it says here the explanation of plate 5, Quetzalcoatl, right? After the deluge, the custom of sacrificing commenced. It says here, according to scripture, therefore, sacrifices commenced immediately after the deluge. But sin, according to the notions of the Mexicans, commenced much earlier, for they believed that sin began with time. Noah was called by the Mexicans Petacatl and Zipaquetona. They said that he invented the art of making wine, which is generally agreed was not known before the deluge, since the patriarchs Noah and Lot were ignorant of its effects, and that he was preserved with 6 others in an ajuejuete, or ark of fir, which is one less than Moses says were saved from the deluge, since 8 persons entered the ark, and that shortly afterwards his descendants built the Tower of Tulan in Cholula. Remember Cholula, part 3 of this series? Tower of Babel, Cholula, and the legends there was built by giants, right? Partly from curiosity to see what was going on in heaven, and partly from fear of another deluge. So in another page of this book, it says Petacatl was the Noah of the New World. He is called by some writers Coxcox, as well as Zipaquetona. Coxcox was the name likewise of the king called Huacan, and who states the Mexicans sought an asylum after their long peregrinations. Again, this was Antiquities of Mexico by Lord Kingsborough. You can find all these codices in all these prestige libraries. An Inquiry into the Origin of the Antiquities of America by John Delafield Jr., with an appendix containing notes and a view of the causes of superiority of the men of the northern over those of the southern hemisphere by James Lackey, M.D. This is from 1839. We're in a part of a book here where it's explaining a codex for hieroglyphic, and it's talking about the cycles, the different cycles of that supposedly men have gone through. And in the 4th cycle, it says here, it lasted 4,008 years. Right, so 10 times 400 plus 8 equals 4,008, the termination of which was a great inundation. So this I guess, this life cycle ended with a flood, which destroyed all mankind. Men were transformed into fish, except one man and one woman, who saved themselves in the trunk of an ajuejuete, or deciduous cypress. Cypressus, the teacher, right? A cider tree, cedars. The drawing represents the goddess of water, and Noah and his wife Coxcox and Xochiquetzal, seated on the trunk of a tree, covered with leaves, and floated amidst the waters. The detached hieroglyphics on the left hand of these pictures are the astronomical, or rather zodiacal symbols denoting the day in which each catastrophe is believed to have occurred. All right, just give examples. All right, here, before I name the book, just a little illustration of Lake of Texcoco, right, where Tenochtitlan was. See, it was like an island, like a lake, protected, right, surrounded by water, city in a lake. All right, and this book is the history of Mexico, collected from Spanish and Mexican historians, from manuscripts and ancient paintings of the Indians, illustrated by charts and other copper plates, to which are added critical dissertations on the land and animals and inhabitants of Mexico by Abi Di Francesco Saverio Clavigero. All right, this is like primary sources from says here the Mexicans used to call Noah Coxcox and Teocipatli, all right, another name Teocipatli, and the Michoacanese Tespi. They used to say that there was once a great deluge, and that Tespi, in order to save himself from being drowned, embarked on a ship formed like an ark, with his wife, his children, and many different animals, and several seeds of fruits, and that of the water abated. He sent out that bird which bears the name of Aura, which remained eating dead bodies, and then sent out another birds, who did not return either, except that little bird, the flower sucker, which was much prized by them on account of the variety of the colors of its feathers, that brought a small branch with it, and from this family they all believed they drew their origin. If therefore we refer to the sacred writings or the traditions of those Americans, we must seek for the peoplers of America among the descendants of Noah. All right? So continuing in the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. In regards to the tribes of the Great Lakes, he says, in former times the father of the Indian tribes dwelt toward the rising sun. Having been warned in a dream that a deluge was coming upon the earth, he built a raft on which he saved himself, with his family. He built a raft on which he saved himself with his family and all the animals. He floated thus for several months. The animals, who at that time spoke loudly, complained and murmured against him. At last a new earth appeared on which he landed with all the animals, who from that time lost the power of speech, as a punishment for their murmurs against their deliverer, or savior, right? Deliverer, Meshach. According to Father Charlevoix, the tribes of Canada and the valley of the Mississippi relate in their root legends that all mankind was destroyed by a flood, and that the good spirit who repeopled the earth had changed animals into men. It is to J.S. Cole we owe our acquaintance with the version of the Chippeways, full of grotesque and perplexing touches, in which the man saved from deluges called Menaboshu. To know if the earth be drying, he sends a bird, all right, just like in the Bible, right? The diver out of his bark, then becomes the restorer of the human race and the founder of existent society. Because here among the Iroquois, there is a tradition that the sea and waters infringed upon the land, so that all human life was destroyed. The Chickasaws assert that the world was once destroyed by water, but that one family was saved and 2 animals of every kind. The Sioux say there was a time when there was no dry land and all men had disappeared from existence. The Nicaraguans believe that ages ago the world was destroyed by a flood in which the most part of mankind perished. Afterward, Deities or gods restored the earth as at the beginning. The wild Apaches, wild from their natal hour, have a legend that the first days of the world were happy and peaceful days. Then came a great flood, from which Montezuma and the Coyote alone escaped. Montezuma became the very wicked and attempted to build a house that would reach to heaven, but the Great Spirit destroyed it with thunderbolts, bankrupt native races, all right?